Namaste, friends, and welcome to our Sunday edition of Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga on our Virat Hindustan Sangam social media channels of YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter Periscope. We beam this program on every Saturday and Sunday at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. On Sunday, we have this program which takes up topical or interesting local issues and international matters. And we also have our Saturday program where earlier we did legal words of wisdom, Nyay Gyan Ganga, and present series is going on the economy known as economic words of wisdom, Arth Gyan Ganga. So today we have a very interesting program, and the topic is multi-pronged Chinese threat and Indo-US relation. As usual, there is Dr. Subramanian Swamy, the founder, president of Virat Hindustan Sangam, and we have another guest, a very learned Professor M.D. Nalapat. He's an Indian academician and journalist associated with the Sunday Guardian and NewsX and the Manipal University. He has been associated in the past with the Times of India and Mathrubhumi, and he writes extensively on security, policy, and international affairs. So, without taking much of your time, I wish to thank my co-host Ramesh Swamy for hosting this program with me today, and I also wish to thank our technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Tejas Navalgul, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Swaminathan, and Vishal Mehta for their useful and painstaking efforts to put this program and working in the background and helping us have these 2 weekly programs for the benefit of our viewers across the globe. So with these remarks, it is over to Dr. Swamy for speaking initially on the topic and then starting the discussion with Professor M.D. Nalapat. Over to Dr. Swamy.
Thank you, Jagdish and Ramesh. It is a great pleasure to have Professor Nalapat once again on our program. His past appearances also have got very good response. He's a scholar in the proper sense of the word. He reads, he writes. He's a professor, I think, of peace studies, UNESCO chair in Manipal University in Karnataka, and he's also, an important figure. I think, a executive director or editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, which has now become a daily. So. I think you can't get a more experienced person, and I'm sorry that our government didn't make him the national security advisor, because it's not a job for a bureaucrat. It's not a job for a military man. It's not. It's for an intellectual, because you have to imagine scenarios, you have to plan for it, and so on. But anyway, we have the benefit of his knowledge in his writings. And today I have invited him because we have a very, very difficult subject to unravel, because the government itself is confused about what is to do, and their responses have been very strange in some ways. So I would like to say that we have said multi-pronged attack by China and Indo-US relations. So they are connected, and I am sure that in his speech, in his talk, Professor Nalapat will definitely tell the linkages. But the fact is that not only the Chinese have got troops in Arunachal and Ladakh, and of course they have also tremendous influence in Nepal, Bhutan now, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. And so, therefore, we are surrounded by them. And the other thing is that in the Bombay power cut shutdown, the Chinese openly boasted that they did it, and there's a warning to India on that. And finally, we have this virus thing, in which we were also participating in the research. We brought a Chinese team, including that lady she who's supposed to be the dragon lady in this. And in Nagaland, they experimented with bats and took the samples home. I mean, except we got money from the Chinese as honorariums, but there's no. And it's surprising that because of Tata's arrogance, no permission from the government was taken, and because of me in the health committee raising the issue, an inquiry was set up, and it was an extensive inquiry headed by, of course, the health ministry, but members were from the army, from the intelligence bureau, RAW, all people who are concerned with the security of India, and they said yes, this has been done irregularly without permission. So we have today in a situation where the Chinese are internally also very active, and externally they are absolutely, if you read the Chinese press, you feel very bad about it. It doesn't come in our press because our press is only glorifying whatever the government is doing. So therefore the Chinese have an objective, and my understanding of that objective is they don't want any third country to come into the picture globally in terms of GDP and PPP terms. In terms of GDP, we are number 3. China is either number 2 or number 1. We haven't got the latest figures yet. And this is the absolute. I'm not talking about per capita. And in terms of technological manpower, we are 3rd area. We are one of the amongst the largest countries in the world after America and China. So therefore, India is a natural position to be a 3rd power, a 3rd angle to the triangle. We don't have to be with the Chinese. We don't have to be. We don't have to be the Americans. But we are now in a situation where the Chinese have made it a choice for us. Either we can't be with the Chinese if you have any self-respect. There are people in India who are arguing that we should, find a way, talk to them and all that, and the bureaucracy is very active in that. But that the Chinese have a clear objective. I have, like Nalapat, who has been many times to China. I've been to China. I mean, my students are there now as professors. They are very frank with me when they speak to me. And the Chinese are very clear that, it's not a question of atmospherics and, being nice to each other and all that. It's got nothing to do with that. We are clear in our mind, their intellectuals say, that its globe is United States and China. And either you align with China or you align with the United States. That's what they want. And they're working towards that. And as far as Russia is concerned, they have already reduced them into a junior partner. And the world over, everybody accepts it. And just now, the Russians proved it by saying very clearly that we have nothing to do with the Indo-China. I think the two countries can decide themselves. Earlier on, they wanted to play, mediatory role. They made us meet the Chinese in Moscow. Rajnath also went, and Jaishankar also went. But now they are very clear. No, this is, you've got to settle with China. We don't come into the picture. So the Chinese have told them to get off. Chinese are now more or less captured Pakistan in terms of its economy, in terms of its intellectuals, in terms of its bureaucrats. The only question is about the army. Army still perhaps still having some connections with the Americans, but that once the Americans leave Afghanistan, then the Chinese will get hold of Pakistan army too. So we'll have a hostile border, pro-Chinese hostile border in Afghanistan and Pakistan. We'll have a hostile border with Nepal, Bhutan now, if not hostile actively but passively, Burma, and then Sri Lanka. Of course, you force them into going with China because you refuse to rewrite the loans in payments, which the previous government had taken from the Congress government. And so all that Rajapaksa wanted is, please reschedule the payments thing, because right now we are in a terrible state. We all are bureaucrats like the National Security Advisor and our Foreign Minister went and strutted around there. Nothing came out of it. And so in disgust, he said, okay, to the Chinese, what do you want for the loans that we owe you? So they said, give us this piece of land in Colombo, you give us a little bit of Humantota, and they're an alternative, but to do it. So before I go to Nalapat, I want to say this. If as a self-respecting nation, we have to recover our land and to assert our natural international position, which is a third global power, should we in the near future stand alone, or do you think for a period we'll have to bond with the Americans, because the Americans are also made now very clear that China is something that has to be opposed, and they have re-emphasized it yesterday and today in the G7 meetings. So where should be India's policy? So I would like Nalapat to begin with that, and then of course he can say whatever else he wants, frankly, and we will not interrupt him. Over to you, Nalapat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Swamy. And I think it's a very important subject that you have chosen, India, the US, and China, because as you correctly said, these are the top three economies in the world in purchasing power parity terms. And whatever the mistakes that government has been doing in India, well, those mistakes have not prevented us from emerging as the number three country in economics, for a simple reason that we have a wonderful people, all 1.4 billion of them. But of course, the reality is that the governance structure in India is not really centered upon all of society or all of people approach. It's not even all of government, actually. So I think as a consequence of that, we have been having some problems in reaching our potential. But despite that, we are definitely number three. And I presume that despite all the mistakes that have been made and could be made, short of some catastrophic events, we will remain number three for some time. I want to say that the Chinese intention, in my view, is not that India aligned with them, because they have made it very, very clear for example, in signing the CPEC. It must have been hidden in the past. But one thing about Xi Jinping, it comes out, whatever the intentions are, quite a lot of it comes out in the open. And the CPEC was a security pact with Pakistan. Now, it means a security pact with the Pakistan army. And all of us know, so far the Pakistan army is concerned, their one intention is to break India, dissolve, if I may say so, this country, and really weaken this country. Well, guess what? GHQ Rawalpindi and the PLA have formed an iron alliance. The alliance between China and Pakistan is, in its fundamentals, the alliance between the PLA, or the Central Military Commission in Beijing, and GHQ Rawalpindi, which runs Pakistan. The Central Military Commission, as Chairman Mao says, the party controls the gun. And it is true the Communist Party does control the military. But the reality is that in Xi Jinping, there is a General Secretary who is extremely respectful of the opinions of the military. And my belief is the military is very trusting of the opinions of the Pakistan military. And I think China, frankly, in Pakistan has entered into what the Soviet Union entered into in Afghanistan. And that is going to play itself out over the course of the next few years. Well, Dr. Swamy, I think you and I share a common regard for Chinese culture and civilization, a common regard for the Chinese people. And may I say about Chinese culture and civilization, it has survived for very long time, millennia. The Manchus took over China and ruled for a very long time. And what happened? The Manchus became Sinicized. The Chinese did not become Manchuized. Whatever that is. Then after some time, there was about a century in which they were effectively under the control of the Western powers. During that time, I mean, the Japanese, with far less trauma, I mean, Japan was never occupied by a Western power until in 1945. The Japanese, during the Meiji Restoration and subsequently, completely adopted Western ways. And you didn't see people in top hats. You didn't see people in three-piece suits. You didn't see people in those, in those, I mean, tailcoats, except perhaps Japanese walking down the streets of London or New York. So the Chinese actually have never done that. I mean, they never did that, even during the time when they were dominated by the Western powers, and they certainly had nothing of the Japanese in them, even in the locations where Japanese had been in them for controlling them, and frankly behaving in a extremely, if I may say so, inhuman way for quite some time. But that didn't affect the people. But there was a change in 1949, and whether it's you call the achievement or I will call it the transformation. India, for example, went through a cultural transformation during the time of Indira Gandhi, and that transformation has continued over the years. But fortunately, that cultural revolution was not as deep rooted as what took place in China, where Mao was very clear. Western new or Western olds was bad, but Chinese old, out with the old, in with the new. I mean, that was Mao's slogan for throughout his rule. And so, in with the new did not mean Western culture at all. In with the new meant the communist adaptation of Western culture. Well, subsequently, Deng Xiaoping adapted communism, to Marxism, to capitalist economics, and what came out, I am not very sure there's very much of Marxism there. Now, what has come out now is a kind of a hybrid culture, and I'm not going to make any, because frankly, this is a subject that needs a lot of intensive study. I would not like to make any kind of a conclusion unless that kind of a study has been done by me or by others. But there has been a significant impact on traditional Chinese culture of the Chinese Communist Party, especially after Deng Xiaoping took over, because Deng Xiaoping's time, he opened the doors completely to Western culture. Jiang Zemin thought he could achieve a fusion of Western culture and Chinese culture. If you go to China at that time, and I have had if I may say so, the privilege and the pleasure of visiting China during all these periods, beginning, if I may say so, with Jiang Zemin, there is a kind of a fusion. And that fusion, you look at opera, you look at the music, and it's not classical Chinese, it's not modern Western or classical Western, it's something in between. It's a unique culture which the Communist Party has brought in China, and it seems to have taken hold there. It seems to have taken hold there very, very clearly. So this is a reality, and you recognize that reality, as I well know. I mean, you understand the Chinese people, their psyche, their culture very well, and it's possible for scholars to know the Chinese language very well. I mean, to mingle with the Chinese people, in fact, even marry into them and have live in their families for a long time without really understanding the psyche of the Chinese people. And you also, the subject that you gave me indicates that you're well aware of the Chinese concept of warfare. The Chinese concept of warfare, as you and I know, is not the Western concept of warfare, which I think is also very significantly the Indian concept of warfare. In fact, the traditional Indian concept of warfare is very chivalric warfare. That's what happened to poor Prithviraj Chauhan when he was surprised by the timing at which he was attacked once again. And well, you know what happened after that. It's chivalric warfare that says, all right, the enemy, I've got him on the ground, let him get up again, in the expectation that his heart and his mind will change, which the Chinese have not made that mistake. Westerners have not made that mistake. And I know, looking at ethics, looking at morality, I would not call it a mistake, but I would only say that this is a policy that has cost us a lot in the past. And anytime it is conducted, I think it is going to cost us in the present and future. So, if I may say so, you have very clearly indicated the question of the comprehensive warfare strategy. Why is that? Because for the Chinese, if there is a war with a country, and they've been at war with the United States right from the 1950s, frankly, it took the Americans a very long time to recognize that. But from the Chinese Communist Party point of view, they were aware they were in a war. And I think they played their cards pretty well, for a simple reason that when you're aware of something and your opponent is still living under some kind of an illusory view of yourself, especially, for example, then you have a problem, a very, very serious problem. And the Americans had that problem. And frankly, they developed China in order to put down the Soviet Union, when the Soviet system could never have reached a tenth of the success of the Chinese system in challenging the American, I wouldn't call the West, the American model, maybe the Atlantic model or whatever, and it's not just democracy, it's technology, it's innovation, it's education, it's political liberties and freedom, it's all these things. I don't think that the Soviets would ever have been a threat to almost any of these issues, but they nurtured, frankly, China, which was definitely, even at that time, maybe in embryonic form, a threat. They underestimated China for a very long time, and this has continued even into the 21st century. It's only very recently that some glimpses of that of reality appear to have come. Barack Obama spoke of some kind of a pivot to Asia. I think what he was implying was, frankly, forget about Russia, let's think about China. Then Donald Trump, if I may say so, being a businessman, not a diplomat, not a politician, and being an individual who speaks his mind, sometimes to his cost, sometimes to the delight of people who are his admirers. Well, he called it out, and he understood what China for what it was, an existential threat to the U.S. system, to the United States. Let me go a little further on that, because as I said, this government is an extremely opaque government. It functions in a lead box. Nobody who's an outsider, and frankly, Dr. Swamy, I would like to say I have no regrets about remaining an outsider and not getting into that lead box, because God knows what kind of effect it will have on thinking inside that box. But I'd like to point out that I have, after several considerable research, reached the conclusion that social media is being utilized very effectively. I looked only at the United States and China because these are two countries that you and I have studied intensively for at least the past 30 years. I've studied these two countries. You've studied these two countries for the last 30 years very intensively, very intensely. And I can tell you, India is a country that it's my country. So obviously, I have a little bit of, ground reality knowledge of my own country. And these two countries, definitely, something weird was happening through social media. Look, what we call the fringes, that is what is very loosely defined as the right and the left, which frankly are, in my view, totally meaningless and irrelevant terms which have absolutely no scholarly value or any scientific validity, because many people who are supposed to be in the right embrace economic ideas of the left, and many people who are in the left, embrace certain social concepts which are also very popular in the right. I don't think there are, I mean, people who have deep religious beliefs in one particular community, for example, only are not very happy, for example, with Valentine's Day, not very happy with some of the other, if I may say so, innovations that have been come about as a result of, and something I'm very happy about, Supreme Court intervention rather than governmental action. I don't want to go into any of that. You and I have discussed that. And what I like about you, what I respect a lot about you, you tolerate differences of opinion. Why? Because you understand that you need differences of opinion. You need multiple threads in a dialogue and a discussion so that together you can, weave those threads into a coherent, factual, viable strategy. If you say, oh, the only thread I'm going to look at is this particular thread or that particular thread, I'm going to exclude this thread, which is why in my case, I'm on some websites that are on what others would call extreme right or extreme left, or right and left, pro Modi, anti Modi, in between, whatever. I am on all of them, and I'm on all of them to, in a sense, I mean, not only because I find some of the conversations fascinating, because it's absolutely essential to understand what is going on in the thinking of people in social media. And what I'm seeing in social media, they are driving the right and left, the so-called right and left, further and further apart. And the moderate middle, and in your case, you got an extremely moderate, background. Your family demonstrates that. Your personal discussions demonstrate that, very frankly, which is why I'm frankly not afraid of expressing anything to you, because you and I, and you expressed a lot of things to me which I'm not at all in agreement with, and you know that. But you know that we're not going to allow that to come between us, because that kind of frankness is absolutely essential. So I'd like to point out that the moderate middle is shrinking in the United States. It's shrinking in India. And more importantly, the propensity of disbelief in the voting method, in the ballot box, is getting lower and lower. Now, sometimes there are technical reasons like EVMs for that. Sometimes there are, you look at, for example, what's happening, in the case of the United States. I believe that this election was as flawed or as perfect as any other US election. For example, I believe that Kennedy stole the election from Nixon through rigging the vote in at least 3 states. But I'm glad he did, because frankly, I dislike Nixon's policy towards India, and Kennedy gave the hope of change, which unfortunately, he was assassinated, he could not do. So it worked out well in the end, but that was definitely a fixed election. But Nixon did not take it up. Al Gore, a lot took place, very frankly. The hanging chads of Florida, as you very well know, and the US Supreme Court. Today, frankly, it's a Republican court. Let's not use any kind of, any euphemism about it. The US Supreme Court is today one of the instruments of the Republican Party in terms of the majority of judges. It has been done very cleverly under Donald Trump. Barack Obama was not smart enough to do it. Unfortunately, Barack Obama was very trusting. Barack Obama was extremely, in a sense, the Prithviraj Chavan mode. And as a consequence, today you have the Republican court, and you've got Republican courts all across the US federal system, which are making decision after decision, which is creating a huge problem from my perspective, because many of these decisions are driving different elements of society further apart and taking them to not only the fringe, but jumping into the water of violence. We saw that, for example, in the agitation, on June 6th in the capital. We saw that, for example, in the march of some, people to into the Indian capital. I mean, who claim to represent a very noble community in India, the farmers, and who claim to represent one of the most patriotic communities in India, the Jat community. Jats are among the most patriotic people in India. They are people to admire. But the people who came in there and what they did, well, personally, I'm not very sure about whether that was good or not. I'm very clear it was not. I'm very clear that what happened on the 6th of January in the US capital was not. But what unfortunately does not seem to have been clear to our own security people and the security people in the United States, that over several years, bots have come, chat boxes have been created, so-called American voices, Indian voices, some real, some imagined, some useful idiots who have been magnifying the gap between different segments of society in such a way that they don't anymore recognize the need for dialogue and the need to resolve things peacefully and democratically.
Yeah, may I interrupt you here?
Please.
I want you to address, based on what you just said, two questions. How do you want to deal with China for what they have done, namely come and occupy your territory? And in order to deal with China, do you think that you need to bond with the United States? And if you want to bond with the United States, what are the costs and benefits? Where it will be, where you will have to accommodate the Americans, and where the Americans will have to accommodate you. And what is it that you want from the Americans, and what is it that you are prepared to give to the Americans? Because the Americans are very give and take people. So these two things.
Yeah.
How do you want to deal with China? How do you want to deal with China now? And two, how do you want to use the United States in that? Yeah.
Dr. Swamy, the Chinese have been active in very, very many ways. But let me just give a small background about why this lab-created virus indicates a level of weaponization and hostility towards India, and now, frankly, significantly India, as much as the United States. And as I said, the Chinese would like to see that we are neutral. Then they don't want us in their corner. They don't want us in the US corner. You and I have known for some time that we have no option. We have to go into that corner, and we have to go into that corner as a power which, in the same way as the Chinese and the Americans work together, as co-equal partners. The Chinese didn't go as a junior partner. They didn't go as I mean, let's be honest. Germany, France, even Britain. I mean, they're not equal to the United States, and they don't pretend to be. The Chinese didn't go like that. The same way, we cannot go as that. I mean, we are not Japan. Let's be honest. They've still got American troops there.
But then,
not Australia in the Quad.
But then tell me concretely, what is it that you want from the United States, and what is it that you're prepared to give them? And two, what will you do with the United States' help to see that the Chinese get out of your territory?
Dr. Swamy, as you very well know, I'm not in the lead box. So, and of course, I don't have any access to inside information at all. I mean, this current national security system is completely sealed off in a manner that, I have not seen in all my decades of looking at this particular system as it operates in India. Frankly, or maybe fortunately or unfortunately, I never took the Indian Police Service exam. I never took the IAS exam. I never took the IFS exam. And unless you take the examination, you're simply not capable and competent enough to discuss anything serious with or to give a second opinion. It doesn't matter, and unless you're a person who, from the outside, who you is well known, will agree with those on the inside of the lead box. Territory, I've said from the very beginning, and I'm glad the government has acknowledged it now by talking about the April claim line rather than saying that no territory was surrendered or no territory was entered. They are now saying the Chinese have to go back to the April 2020 claim line,
but saying
not the April.
But saying is not enough. Saying is not enough. What are you going to do to make them go?
Dr. Swamy, I would only like to say that I would like to see the Quad become a military alliance. I am not going to call it an Asian NATO, but I'm certainly going to say the military component of the Quad is important for the simple reason that ASEAN and other countries, why are they waffling? Why are they behaving the way a certain other country is behaving, which I'm not going to name here because it's embarrassing, but has been behaving for a very long time, sitting on the fence all the time on the big issues of the day.
Who?
And
Which
then
country
expecting
is sitting on the
people to come.
fence?
I'm afraid, Dr. Swamy, that I don't have the sharp memory that you have, and so I have forgotten the name of that country. It's a large country, that's all I can say, a very significant country, but I've forgotten the name. But I'd like to say I want to see a militarized Quad, and I want a system in which it's all against any enemy who attacks any one of the Quad members or any of the partners of the Quad members. And in that, I include, for example, I very much include, attack in any way. If they attempt to take it over, by example, through taking over the political structure, taking over the cultural and educational space, taking over through the health space, in any way, countries such as Afghanistan, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, let's be clear about this. Taiwan, well, I think the Philippines, not to mention, of course, Japan, taking over any territory belonging to Japan. Any territory belonging to Japan is something that all of us should be active in protecting.
Now,
any territory belonging to Australia or the United States, we should be active. They should be active, and the only way is, as you correctly said, to work out an agreement and adjustment with them.
The Chinese are in
avoids
occupation.
the fiction that we are Gandhian war.
No, I'm going to ask you a question. Again, the Chinese are in full occupation of Depsang. Would you like to see the Indian army, with whoever's help you want, the United States, the Quad, etc., that Indian army, after it is sufficiently confident that they are well prepared, go and evict the Chinese from Depsang?
Yeah, Dr. Swamy, I'd like to say very clearly that the answer to that is yes. And frankly, I'd like to say very clearly, Indian army is perfectly capable of doing that if it has support from the United States, support from Japan, Taiwan, Australia, etc., UK,
yes,
etc. Indian army perfectly capable of ensuring the next kind of war, which is anyway going to come. I mean, and possibly in the next 1 year, 2 years, it's going to come. Well, that war will go right into the Tibetan plateau. It will not cross the Himalayan ranges. It will go across the Himalayas into the Tibetan plateau. I would like to see that. Our Air Force, our Navy and Air Force, with the help of friends, any soldier from any country to come to India, our military, our army is perfectly capable of doing the job alone, as our Navy and Air Force are. But I'd like to say logistical help from the United States for our army and help for those and Japan. If this and the United States, if this happens, I can tell you the next war will frankly lead very quickly to Jawaharlal and could not understand the significance of it. The last Prime Minister, finally, I may say so, of surrender was Mr. Vajpayee, who's not a congressman, who's not a member of the, who was never a member of the Nehru family, who's in fact adored and admired by many, by 2003. But frankly, not recognize the reality of Tibet in our diplomacy, in our politics, but let's at least recognize this in our military and out when the next war comes, we are going to repeat them. They are going to face a 1962.
Yes, that's right. Now, supposing the Americans say we will give you help, you should stop having buying weapons from the Russians like S-400 because they all now got Chinese electronics, and you can't fight a war with Chinese electronics on your planes, and that you must also do a share of burden of ours. We are going to quit Afghanistan. Please go and send about 20,000 troops there and take over Afghanistan and help the people there who want democracy there. Are you in agreement that we should oblige the Americans on that?
Well, I'd like to say about Afghanistan, I don't believe we should send our troops there, but I do believe that we should help the Afghan National Army, and we should persuade the Americans not to cut and run and surrender, because the one day they are going to regret it, as they regretted, frankly, Bill Clinton's. He was the godfather of the Taliban. And unfortunately, Donald Trump signed a surrender instrument with the Taliban, which Joe Biden has recognized, very unfortunately. And I would like to see us help the Afghan National Army, persuade the Americans to help them sufficiently, because Afghans, I can tell you, they are definitely in a position to take on the ragtag Taliban militia. It's a ragtag militia, frankly. The Russians lost because they didn't have the nerve to basically go after Pakistan. If you had a few bombs dropped on Peshawar and Rawalpindi, I can assure you that would have been the end of a lot of the activity in Afghanistan. There would have been a stalemate. I'm not saying that it would have been a victory, because I think the Russians did wrong in invading and occupying a foreign country and trying to impose their own culture on it. That is very wrong. But let me tell you, it is the cowardice of the Soviet Union, the strategic cowardice of the Soviet Union in never going after Pakistan and going, because if that had happened, the Afghan war would not have ended in the shameful way it did, and which frankly hastened the Soviet collapse. I would only like to say that the Afghans can look after themselves, but it's very important we ensure the Taliban don't come back. I have seen some reports that India has been talking to moderate Taliban. There is no such thing. You may as well go to the GHQ Rawalpindi and talk to the moderate generals, the moderate colonels, the moderate captains. Well, I met these people sometimes in the Middle East, sometimes in Colombo, sometimes in Far Eastern locations. I haven't found anybody who is not. Of course, they tell the nice things to me. They are great admirers of Mahatma Gandhi. I don't look at what they say. I look at what they do. And what they do, very, very frankly, that, it's very clear. They're absolutely a deadly enemy. Well, so is the PLA. And we have to recognize that this is an enemy. Now, you're talking about, S-400. I've been subject to a lot of trolling and abuse, including, I'm sure, by many people watching this program, because of my consistent stand. We have to avoid the S-400. part of the reason is what about electronic system. The other reason is that the Americans, should know, certainly we should know, the Russians and Chinese are completely linked at the hip now. And that means, from the Chinese point of view, they will be serving the interests of the Chinese military. And any weapon they give to us will be also configured in such a way that the military will be given. It may not be the case. Maybe the Russians will make an exception, maybe not. But frankly, I don't think, Dr. Swamy, if I were any advice I was to give for any of the policymakers, which I do not, I would say that's too big a risk to take. And frankly, taking the S-400 means you are denying yourself of the most advanced military technology that we need to fight the next Sino-Indian war. You are in fact facilitating the Chinese military in planning for the next war and removing the obstacles, quite frankly, that
you mean the most advanced thing from the United States? If you
absolutely. And may I again remind
you didn't mention from where?
No, from the United States, obviously. I certainly don't think we're going to get anything from China. That's so value. May I point out? Sorry, just one more point. Many of the drones, I'm not going to name the various institutions, official institutions in India that are purchased Chinese-made drones or drones made by cutouts of Chinese companies in third countries. Mobiles, for example, mobile telephone, they have a tremendous amount of data still flowing through. And the Prime Minister did a good job in trying to block the apps, but very frankly, you can still access TikTok, you can still access WeChat if you go through very simple processing. And so it's hardly a ban, if you ask me, but that needs to be enforced. The decoupling is a reality. And another reason why we need the United States and India to come together for, if I may say so, as a partnership, as a security partnership, is you have to give a clear signal to all those who are decoupling from China. And we are talking about trillions of dollars. The Taiwanese themselves have invested about $1 trillion in China. They are in a hurry to get out. They would like to come to India, but they can't come to India unless they believe India is also agreeing that the threat is from China. Under Dr. Tsai, the Taiwanese reached that conclusion 5 years ago and started working on that basis. I'm not sure we have reached that conclusion yet. So I'd like to say, Dr. Swamy, I'd just like to again, go back, if you don't mind, to why after 2020, if people still think in that we can work with China or that we can trust countries that are linked to China at the hip, I'd just like you to go through the trajectory of SARS. I remember, writing in the Daily Guardian some time ago about therapeutics, because about that and various other things. Look, let me say in very simple language, as somebody who's not an expert in the subject. The bat virus is RATG13, right? Now, what happened to this bat virus? It's a completely harmless virus. You can have 100 bats floating around in your room, and 90 of them can be infected with RATG13, which is the progenitor of SARS-2, what we are seeing now. You would have no problem at all, not even a sniffle, not even a cough, except that, and they have very good radar. They certainly are not going to, bump into you. I'm very surprised that a bat entered into the narrow doorway of a huge Boeing 47 jet, or rather, I don't know, if it's a Boeing 777 jet of Air India. The Air India thinks they came in accidentally. Well, a bat has got the best sonar in the world, and if a bat did come accidentally, then it is obviously probably one of the few bats in the world without a sonar, but they would have destroyed it without finding out, because if it had any kind of sonar, it would have avoided that particular plane and flown miles away, like it will avoid you. Dozens of bats will avoid you, even in a crowded room. You test that, because They are very good sonar. But this harmless virus, what happened? There's a lady called She, and she is very working very was working very is very was very working closely with Americans. She was working very closely with a guy called Peter Daszak, who basically, in a sense, funded her research through Anthony Fauci funded research through. Daszak had a very high opinion of her. He knew her extremely well, and personally also as a human being, he not only liked her work, he liked her as a human being. And another person called Barik, another American professor in the University of North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, this is the same university that changed Arabic textbooks to reflect a Wahhabi view of the Islamic faith. And we all know that particular Frankenstein, that this particular university, I think it was this university, they had a huge contract to change text. If it's not this university, I'm apologizing, in advance to them. It may be somebody else, but some small university in the United States did this work and transformed what was originally written in the Arabic into language, and borrowed from various hadiths and whatever and all that in such a way that it kind of weaponized that teaching, and in such a way that the most, if I may say so, kinetic elements came to the surface. That was gain of function research in changing a manuscript, and that was what was done in America and sent in in plane loads and ship loads throughout the Gulf countries, through South Asia, the Middle East, everywhere. And the effect of that has been Wahhabism. I'm happy to say the current Saudi Arabian crown prince is opposing that openly, but he's being opposed by many goody people. I have said whatever he's been doing, I would like to say, is obliterated by the fact that the first member of the Al Saud family to stand up against Wahhabism was, Prince, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and therefore I have always supported it. Now look, what happened? She inserted a nucleotide code for something called the PRRA amino acids of furin, cleavage. Don't ask me what a furin cleavage is. Don't ask me what a nucleotide code is. Even an amino acid, I've got barely kg language of it. But she did that to penetrate ACE2 cells. ACE2 cells, what are they? They're human cells. So a bat virus that could not penetrate a human cell, that was dangerous only to other bats, was changed through a nucleotide code being inserted by Dr. Shi to penetrate ACE2. And what did she do? She was not satisfied with this. She had plenty of money after all, which Fauci and Daszak gave her to play around with. She had a lot of collaborators with her, American, French, European,
Indian,
you name
Indian
it.
Also. Indian also, Tata Institute.
I'm sorry. Look,
Indian
as a member of parliament, you get access to more data than I do. I'm sticking to the access I have as a private citizen. But I'd like to say she added another spike. She added spikes to it through genome modification. And these spikes completely, lock on. It's like thorns. Thorns completely lock onto your clothing or to your skin.
But we are going
this is what this.
No. We are going too far afield because of time factor. I have to stop you here. We are not on that. We know that the Chinese have their ulterior purpose. We have not fully understood it. The Americans are slowly coming around to it. And in fact, the G7, they have adopted that China is going to be something that we will unitedly face. You said, before I ask my other colleagues if they want to say something to you, you said you are in favor of using military force to evict the Chinese. That's a welcome statement from my point of view. But in order for that, you need modern, much superior weapons than you have at the moment. Although our chaps can even fight with bare hands, that they have proved it in Galwan. But That the Americans can give you, and the Americans want to make sure that your fidelity towards them is good, so they don't want you to be also in the bed with the Russians. So therefore, you say give up that, and the Russians anyway are junior partners of the Chinese. So therefore, and now they have washed their hands off in the negotiations between India and China, whatever little is taking place at the military level. So if the Americans say that we are going to do all this for you, you must also share our burden. And you say, yes, let's develop the Afghanistan army, but without our people being there, how can you train them? You see, you have to have your people, military people in Afghanistan, win the terrain, and help these Afghan fighters to learn the techniques that you know. And for that, you need to send troops, and then you have to send more troops to protect your troops, which had gone there earlier.
Well,
I think that you should, on this issue, you should give it a little more thought, I think, whether Indians should send troops to Afghanistan or not.
Yeah, I'll do that. But may I just, respond to your question by pointing out that the SARS-2, if it were not laboratory created, you had the Alpha variant. I think it's called the UK variant, sometimes Brazilian, whatever, which are all named by after countries. That took place a few months after SARS-2, and suddenly, in a few months, you have the Delta variant. Now, these variants develop naturally. There is no way they could have developed except through lab work, and that lab work could only have been done by the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which means the so-called second wave was a planned bioterror attack.
Okay.
This Delta strain that you're talking about it could not have happened naturally because of the quick time in which SARS-2, the kind of virus that was developed, deadly to humans, and the Delta variant, the Alpha variant entering the lungs, Delta 50% more transmissible, 50% more deadly, and lo and behold, it's India that gets this particular variant, and everybody is talking about the India variant. So if you look at anybody's memory now, is forget Delta. Oh, you've forgotten the China virus. You've forgotten even SARS-2 or the China virus. You're talking about the India virus, and not even and that has been done. Anybody who was aware that bioterror was operational, I think, frankly, we needed to take minimal precautions against the second wave, because I think it was inevitable. And unless the Chinese are named and shamed, there will be a third wave. And
well, we have not named the Chinese.
Other viruses also.
But we have not named the Chinese even in Depsang and Galwan.
No. Are you looking at the Joint Secretary in the Home Ministry in India?
No,
I had no idea.
I'm looking at the Prime Minister.
Well, I am not the Prime Minister.
Who said nobody came and nobody went? Anyway, that's another subject.
Dr. Swamy, I'm not the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister
I know you're not the Prime Minister. Well, I'm not going into that. I think, you have brought in a huge number of dimensions. I was trying to see whether it can be worked out in a different way. I think my colleagues certainly would like to ask you some questions if you have, you can spare a little more time. This has been extremely interesting. This has been extremely interesting, but your knowledge, you see, is so multidimensional that every subject you see several dimensions. Whereas I think we are only interested in two dimensions. One dimension is get the Chinese out of Ladakh and Arunachal if they're there. Two, that bond with the Americans and get the best equipment for that purpose, and go along with the Americans in the sense of giving, and the Americans will also expect something for you. They're not going to give you something free. So that's the bottom line. All the other aspects of how the Chinese are working, it's a part of your multidimensional threats from China. So from that time, it's very useful. But you've gone into great detail, and I think we should have one separate talk with you on the COVID menace and what are the different variants and how it came about as a separate lecture.
Dr. Swamy, this background is why my reply to you is an unqualified yes to both your questions.
Okay. Now, what about you three? What about you two? Do you have any questions to ask? Ramesh?
For Dr. Swamy, it's a question to you, because right now, at least from a G7, the mood seems to be all the G7 seems to be targeting China. So, but is there something that India can take advantage of, in the sense that yes, China is being seen as be it the now that the Wuhan lab leak theory is spreading like wildfire across the globe, people are seeing China as as something that is creating a lot of trouble. But from what you said earlier in the beginning, that we've still not got not even an inch of land back. So we're still trying to do talk after talk after talk, 14, 15, 16, I don't know what. Maybe set a new world record. But given the current situation, how can India take advantage and see and push this thing back? Is it possible now?
In G7, two things came out.
Okay.
China, of course, became part of the final communique, and so it stands out. But they also said that the Soviets, the Russians, have committed unconscionable crimes against their own people, including poisoning some of the leaders and so on to death. And the British Prime Minister went on record on that. So you have to take China in tandem with Russia. You can't have a policy of being friends with Russia and being enemies of the Chinese.
Yeah, each a junior, as you said, Russia is a junior partner of China, so you can't separate them.
Junior partner, you see. And in what way are they going to support you? And now Putin has become very frank, because we went on putting pressure on him. He said, I have nothing to do with this. This is between India and China. Just 2 days ago, he has said that. So I am more concerned of the fact that the Americans, knowing whatever I mean, I've lived with them for 10 years continuously. So and you live in America, you know that they are very practical people. You take something from them, you better give them something. Otherwise, if you give something and not take something, you are an idiot. And if you take something and not give them, then you are a rascal. So there has to be give and take. And the Americans have got only one thing in mind: how to see that the Chinese influence, along with the Pakistanis and the Taliban, do not come to Afghanistan, but they don't want to go on bleeding, and they are getting tired, so they want to withdraw the troops. Do we have an interest there at all? Of course we do have an interest. We have the so-called POK has a border with Afghanistan, and we are committed to take it back. So if they, yes, I don't think we should go to battle with the Taliban. That the Afghan thing there, Nalapat is correct. But in order to be able to train the Afghan forces, you have to have 20,000 troops, soldiers in Afghanistan, and train them there on the spot. And this is the thing that we have been avoiding. I don't know why. You can't get something for nothing. And I am really afraid that in the end, we may fall between two stools. Already the treatment given to us by the Americans is our media can give all kinds of spin, but I know exactly how they have been handling us, including making the foreign minister wait 5 days after the Secretary of State cancelled his appointment, and then said, I can meet you 5 days later if you stay here 5 days, which he did. So I think we are this wooziness, that we can get everything with everybody, or we can be friends with everybody. These are all Nehruian ideas which are still permeating our society, and that is what I was trying to focus on. Take an explicit stand. We are with the Americans on a Quad, and that means fighting with the Americans where we can contribute. We are not going to send troops to Vietnam and Taiwan and so on. We are definitely going to meet the Chinese threat, which is also a threat of the Americans from our point of view. And all we need is weapons. We don't need American troops. So there's kind of clear-cut presentation of our relations. That's what I wanted to do. So that's the answer to your question.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So yes. One last thing, Dr. Swamy. Now,
Yes.
Biden has proposed, and I think the G7 has adopted a new Belt and Road Initiative, or to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, like what they've done. I think it's a very strategic thing that India should align itself, being a member of the Quad, align itself to that ideology, so that, I mean, right now China is threatening. I mean, I think about a couple of weeks ago when there was a press conference, China was saying we're going to build a road to Afghanistan or something like that. And they said, when a question was raised, hey, you're going to actually cut through India, they didn't seem to bother. They didn't see, they just brushed it aside.
Yeah, they don't recognize POK as part of India.
Dr. Swamy,
Yeah.
Dr. Swamy, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead. You're the star of the
I'd
show.
like to say very clearly that you're absolutely right. It has to be a situation in which we also contribute heavily to security. There's no question about that. And as for the mechanics of that, that has to be worked out. But the Taliban have to be defeated. And one way, for example, will be for us, essentially. I mean, the Americans, I think, one place they would like to see us active is when the Chinese provoke us in such a way that any country would respond. That response should be a very, not only a muscular response, but a comprehensive response that basically is carried through to a logical conclusion. The army did a very brave operation, took over the Kailash Heights.
Yeah, imagine.
So we have and we gave it back. I mean, frankly, I didn't see any logic in that. But it was argued to me that no, they're going to be withdrawals in Hot Springs and Pogra, etc. Well, as you correctly, I said to them, I said it publicly, I wrote about it. They're not going to withdraw from anywhere. These are not people who are going to withdraw, and we have made a mistake. That's true. We have made many mistakes. In Afghanistan, there are ways of doing it, but I'm not sure that all these ways. I can only say one thing. I can only say one thing, Dr. Swamy. Please let me say the fundamental point. 2024 Lok Sabha election will be very crucial for the country.
Yeah.
As, for example, the US election of 2020 was. And I can tell you that from my investigation, the opposition is not really worried about putting up a popular person or putting up any kind of a popularity contest or a contest in sentiment or anything. They believe the BJP will do their work for it. You remember that Sonia Gandhi, with some help by all kinds of exposés by you, did a lot of the work of the BJP in the 2014 election. They believe that in the 2024 election, the security situation facing India, the health situation facing India, and the economic situation facing India are going to come in a stream by which they don't have to do anything. The BJP will ensure the victory of the opposition for them. This is their view. This is their actual view. Now, I mean, whether it comes out or true, I don't know. 2024, a lot can change, but this is their view based on a linear projection of what they have seen since 2014. This is their opinion. That if this linear view more or less continues up to 2024, now it's 2021, well, we don't have to do anything. And, in 77, for example, I mean, was the Janata Party, let's be honest, it was a completely ramshackle collection of parties who hated each other. And you had Vajpayee there, you had Ram Manohar, all kinds of people there, Raj Narayan. But then what happened? They won. Why? The people voted against. In India, when the public sentiment rises beyond a certain pitch, it doesn't matter who the opposition is. They will vote for that particular. What happened in Bengal? those Marxist and Congress votes who were basically, in the past election had gone for BJP in preference to Mamata Banerjee's TMC. This time around, for some reason, they chose TMC over the BJP, and you see the difference in voting numbers, see the difference in constituencies. You'll see what I'm talking about. So I'm only saying, Dr. Swamy, I mean, you get it, I get it, and I mean, I think everybody should get it. As far as the Americans are concerned, yes, they would like to see us as a security partner. They wouldn't like to see us as a fair weather friend or somebody who's jumping in one backyard one day and other backyard one day, and googling our eyes at one country the other day and looking in the other direction the other day. They'd like a clear strategic plan and a clear strategic alliance. And my answer is, I have written this for more than 2 or 3 years. So quite frankly, if people have not read what I'm writing, if people have not heard me on some television channels, I'm sorry, but I've been arguing precisely what you're saying now for about 3 years. And if 2020 has not convinced people that you were right, I was right, I don't know what's going to convince them, especially the so-called Delta variant.
Jagdish has something to say.
Jagdish, go ahead.
No, I have only thing, taking all this into consideration, my repeat question and the viewers are asking is, why is the government led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi not able to name China as the person who has occupied land? There are two differences. One is the land of 1962, that is separate, but the LAC land of recent years, why is the Prime Minister short of naming China as the aggressor? I want both of you gentlemen to please tell us.
Yes, Mr. Nalapat.
Your voice is muted.
Dr. Swamy, all I can say is that I think naming them would be helpful to India. And frankly, the Chinese are not fooled or taken for a ride. We had this thing about security issues in all our neighboring countries. We annoyed Bangladesh. We annoyed all our neighboring countries. When everybody knew it was China, China knew it was China. And it was, I don't see why we needed to hide that. So, personally, I think we should name China, because this is a situation in which you have to choose sides. The Chinese chose a side in World War I, and they got a huge benefit from it. We can get a huge benefit from Cold War II, not World War I, sorry, Cold War I. So USSR and US. Cold War II is between the US and the PRC, and we can get a huge benefit from it, but we have to take a clear side. Deng Xiaoping was smart enough to see that. Mao was smart enough to see that, and I don't know why, what the thinking is in government. The people in government are people I know and I respect and regard very highly. I can't speak for them, but if I were in any of these things, I would definitely do as you say and name China.
Okay,
Dr. Swamy, your view.
Well, you see, there is no question of two options here. The Chinese creeped in, and you had meetings of 18 one-to-one meetings with Narendra Modi had one-to-one meetings with Xi Jinping. He didn't get a clue, and then suddenly they turn up in this Galwan Valley, and our chaps have to use bare hands because of the ban on using of weapons in the LAC region. And then at that stage, the Prime Minister goes on record to say, "Koi bhi aaya nahi, koi bhi gaya nahi." And to date, he has not said that China has aggressed in our country. Our IPL is still using Chinese electronics. What is Vivo, whatever it's called.
Vivo. As sponsor, one of the sponsors.
Yeah, all the Chinese companies are still working.
And
they are still taking our raw materials.
There's a contract on the Olympic team, they're having the same Chinese logo or something.
Yeah, there you are. So, what is it? What is the problem? And you don't want to give up the Russians, whom you know very well have not sided with you. They have only played the Chinese game throughout. They got you to the table and you got nothing. And then you may say something so ridiculous that as a gesture we withdrew from Kailash range, and the Chinese will then follow suit. They did nothing of the kind. They in fact said nothing doing. Be happy with what you have got today. This is the Chinese official statement. That is, we didn't take more than we have taken. So where is the question that this is a question of policy, and there's a policy question, policy difference? It's a black and white. They have taken over your land and sitting on it and building cantonments, and you're not ready to say they are aggressors. Okay. And you're going to get Xi Jinping to come for BRICS meeting to New Delhi in November. So therefore, I think the problem is, how do you make up your mind? If the Prime Minister it's the Prime Minister who has to make up his mind. And it's no use blaming people, because he has selected people who don't want to say anything that he doesn't want to hear. So he has to make up his mind, or the party must tell him to make up his mind. Somewhere this clarity has to come, otherwise even the Americans, even though they may desire you to be in Quad one of these days, like they did in Afghanistan, they said, okay, we'll talk with the Taliban if you if you don't see your interest there. And tomorrow they say, okay, Chinese occupied your territory, that's your problem. You said you can you can look after the alone. So the real issue is that, and the Bhaktas may get upset. The fact is that the buck stops with the Prime Minister.
Right.
And we said that when it was Jawaharlal Nehru, and we know that a Prime Minister can take initiative. Lal Bahadur Shastri, when he found that they had taken Haji Pir, he said, go to Lahore. And if Chinese collapsed, Pakistanis collapsed. And so I think the moment of truth has come, and we don't have to pussyfoot. We must demand that the Chinese aggression has to be answered in a way that they will understand and not make fun of you about it.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Swamy.
I'll just tell you one more reason. No, Ramesh, to deter future bioterror attacks.
Yeah.
The only way is to show that you are willing to retaliate, and retaliate in force. By withdrawing from Kailash, you gave an impression of weakness. It would have helped those who said, let's hit India with the Delta variant and let's put all the blame on India, shift it from China, because they know that the response from India will not be proportional. So all I can say, Dr. Swamy, I am not a member of parliament. I am not in the government. So I really don't know what the thinking is on this matter. I'm only giving you my thinking as a private citizen.
Yeah, but Dr. Swamy, all these kind of Delta variants introducing is also like they're doing their test and seeing that how would India react. I mean, India is still going to be tepid in their responses. And be weakened about any response, and this is what it is. I mean, the reason why I continue to bring back this new initiative that the G7 says, they're trying to spend about $4 or $5 trillion in what they call as the Bring Back the World, initiative to counter the China Belt and Road initiative, because China has invested trillions of dollars across the globe. Now, India should take advantage of this, because India, as you said, India has got a big labor force. They can do all these huge infrastructure project constructions and take advantage of it rather than just sit around and wait for something to fall in its lap. I don't think that's the right strategy. But as you said, it's not just going and say, okay, give me work and I'll make money. That's not the case. You should give back something. So as you said, and say, okay, we'll send some troops to Afghanistan. It's a give and take. I agree with you on that point. And
you have lost friends. This Sri Lankan said India is our relative, so it gets first choice.
And we did not do it. We let go of the Hambantota.
We may send bureaucrats to humiliate him. You see, then he was under pressure because the previous government had taken so many loans from China. He wasn't able to, so he said, all right, take what you want and write it off against the loan. So the issue, and the same thing with Nepal, the same thing with Bhutan. Bhutan is now completely adjusted with China. the road that the Chinese wanted from Nathula to down
Yeah.
the Sikkim border right up to Bagdogra. They have given them permission to build it.
Okay.
So I think, the pussyfooting must end, and we must ask, put it across to him. It's not only members of parliament, it's also people who write in newspapers, people, intellectuals. They must say to the PM, the buck stops with you. Please tell us how you're going to get rid of the Chinese from Ladakh, which is a mutually agreed Indian territory in 1993.
So all along,
Okay,
people
but
are saying, yeah,
I think we are
Yeah.
really, I think
We've
it's
gone-
been a very popular lecture that's done almost 1.5 hours.
Yeah.
Friends,
Well, it's because of you, I must say, that I realized I have always, anyway,
I'm
all I
with
can
you.
say, please understand, Dr. Swamy, that,
Yes.
I'm as completely mystified as many others are. And I mean, frankly, I'm mystified, completely mystified.
Okay.
Good.
Jagdish ji, you can conclude.
okay. Friends, it was a very interesting session listening to both Professor M.D. Nalapat and Dr. Swamy on this important issue. And I thank both of them for their valuable inputs and insights into this topic. We will be meeting again next Saturday on the Economic Words of Wisdom, Arth Gyan Ganga, and on Sunday at our regular time, 8 p.m. on our regular Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga. I thank my co-host Ramesh Swamy, and I also wish to thank Ashish Shetty, Tejas Navalgul, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Swaminathan, and Vishal Mehta for their support. But both our today's speakers, Professor Nalapat and Dr. Swamy, have raised one issue, and this is for the benefit of all the viewers and well-wishers of the present government, that if things don't improve before 2024, it's going to be a big challenge for us, and we don't want those forces which are not in favor of India, especially the political forces in India, who are not for a nationalistic approach or issues. It's a warning signal that we must improve, and our present government should pay more attention to these burning issues, or 2024 will be a great issue or problem for us. So with this note, I am signing off, and I thank all our viewers across the globe for their excellent support in viewing us. And thanks, Professor Nalapat and Dr. Swamy. Jai Hind and Dhanyavad.